The biggest thing that Martin did was he believed in me. He always saw something greater for me than I dared to imagine. He helped me to believe things about my future that I couldn't. One thing that he was persistent about, he was absolutely certain that I would go on to lead a great program. Whether he believed it or not, he made me believe it. Martin died several years ago, but every day, I try to live up to what he saw in me. And a great mentor can do that. That is one of the powers of a great mentor. Welcome to The Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Justin, as we continue our rotation through the 4 C's of leadership, character, competence, caring, and communication, we should be discussing a competence-related topic today.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. I've been thinking about what it means to develop competence as a leader. Some of it's obviously on-the-job training, but I've been thinking about what is the role of a mentor in respect to leaders and leadership.
Oh, that's a great topic. And it's one that's actually near and dear to my heart. I'm totally sold on the benefits of mentoring. In my own life and career, as a mentee, I've had multiple superb mentors. I've formally mentored over 50, probably 60 by now, physicians at different stages of their careers. I've built and led mentoring programs. I mean, I'm all in on the idea of mentoring.
Before we get too much in the weeds or the science of mentoring, I think it's always helpful, like we do on most of our episodes, talk about what we're talking about. So let's define mentoring a little more. So what is a mentor and what does it mean?
Well, recognizing I can geek out on the topic of mentoring, I think it would be worth briefly touching on where the idea of mentoring actually comes from. So a lot of our listeners will have some familiarity with Homer's Odyssey. The central character in that epic was Odysseus, and Odysseus was the king of Ithaca. And Odysseus had a son, and his son was named Telemachus. And Telemachus was an infant when Odysseus was about to set out to fight the Trojan War. Recognizing he might be gone for a long time, Odysseus asked his friend, Mentor, to oversee Telemachus as far as his development in his youth, to be a teacher to him, a guide, a confidant. Odysseus was gone for 20 years, and during that 20-year time, while he was off fighting wars and surviving sirens and the Cyclops and all of his exploits, Mentor was guiding Telemachus' development into a man. And that's where we get this idea of a mentor.
I mean, I've probably had to or read the Odyssey at some point, but I honestly can't say that I actually remember that character, which just shows a little bit about my recall of that book. So that gives us a little bit of obviously where the word came from and what at least a mentor in its historical origin should have been.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's helpful. It certainly informs how I think about finding a mentor, also how I go about mentoring myself. So, you said in the past that over the last bit, you've been thinking about the role that mentors play in our development as leaders. Previously, you talked about Mike Schmitz, a colleague of ours who has been a mentor to you. Who's another mentor that you would say has had a profound impact on you and on your leadership? How did that person shape the leader you are today?
I think it's an interesting question. Like I have been thinking a lot about mentorship and what it is to be a mentor, but also to have a mentor. And I think in everything, when you define something, it's easy to also define the opposite, define the contrast, sort of as light exists only in its relationship to darkness. when I think about a mentor, I think about some bad mentors I've had. I'm sure you've had the
Okay.
same in academic practice. You have people that present themselves as mentors, and it's usually in some research type avenue where really what the mentor is looking for in their goal is to promote their own career. And you've talked about this in leadership. The leader usually eats last.
Hmm.
They put the people they're leading above themselves and really hope for the success of the team more so than themselves. The bad mentors I've had in the past always sort of looked at this person I'm mentoring and helping. How is that going to impact me? Are they going to take some of my fame away, some of my research? They always cared that they were first or last author, and they really would never put you in a position to succeed if it had any possibility of hurting their career or their standing. Contrast that with a couple great mentors I've had. One, Dr. Mike Schmitz, the other, Dr. Hal Schaffner at Hopkins. Both had these two qualities. One, they always looked to put me in a position to succeed, regardless of how it impacted them, and many times to their own detriment, meaning they had to step back from something or leading something to allow me to lead that, to mentor me to lead. So they always put me in positions to it. And also, they gave me the tools to succeed. And I would say those are two qualities that those people both had that seemed, honestly, looking back, pretty rare. They were really strong mentors in that, like you've talked about in a leader, their goal was to have me succeed, my project, everything about that, regardless of the impact it had on them personally or their own personal sacrifice. But
Yeah.
those are the two that sort of come to my mind when I think about that.
Yeah. That those are really great examples of mentor and that powerful influence they can have on us, um, and also the important point that there are folks out there that can seem to be, may want to be mentors. Perhaps they don't know how to be, and they don't recognize that the great mentors are the ones that are lifting other people up.
So I'll throw the question back to you. You know, we've talked about Rick Loudon in your past and sort of the mentorship that he had for you. But when we're trying to say what should a leader be, do you have another example of sort of a mentor that you've had in your past that really demonstrated the qualities, the characteristics of a just truly exceptional leader in your life or mentor in your life?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've been blessed with a number of absolutely phenomenal mentors during my training, during my career, who've had, I think, profound impacts on me as a person, on my success as an academic physician. I can rattle off a number of them: Bruce Alpert, Rush Waller, Martin St. John Sutton, Paige Kaplan, Jim Robbins, Gary Shaw, and Steve Roth are among the pantheon of mentors that I've had. And I am honestly where I am and who I am because of their influence today. Um, I would say while they've all been and still are instrumental in my life and development, it's probably, to answer your question, it's probably better for me to only pick out a couple of them, sort of like you did. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. The first is Martin St. John Sutton. Martin was an adult cardiologist at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, when I was in training as a fellow. He was this soft-spoken, exceptionally accomplished Englishman. He had an endowed chair at the University of Pennsylvania, over 500 peer-reviewed manuscripts. He created what is known as cardiac resynchronization therapy, using pacemakers to try to improve heart function. And I got to know him because he did some adult congenital heart disease, and I was told I should meet with him. Interestingly enough, Martin had Parkinson's disease, which when you couple that with his soft spokenness and English accent, made him nearly unintelligible to most people. But perhaps because of where I'm from in Appalachia, because I could listen, I could actually understand him when other folks couldn't. So I would wander over to his office every month or so at the hospital, University of Pennsylvania, what we would refer to as HUP. And he would advise me on how to navigate the politics of academia, how to get papers published in big journals, how to do a host of other things. The biggest thing that Martin did was he believed in me. He always saw something greater for me than I dared to imagine. He helped me to believe things about my future that I couldn't. One thing that he was persistent about, he was absolutely certain that I would go on to lead a great program. Whether he believed it or not, he made me believe it. Martin died several years ago, but every day, I try to live up to what he saw in me. And a great mentor can do that. That is one of the powers of a great mentor. So that was Martin St. John Sutton. The second mentor that I would highlight is Rush Waller. Rush is a pediatric cardiologist. I met him when I was a resident in training, and he's who I wanted to be when I grew up. And honestly, in a lot of ways, he still is. He's professional and kind and affable and a great cardiologist and a family man. He's respected for the person he is, and he's a great leader. Currently, he's the chief medical officer of a really great children's hospital. Like Martin, for some reason, he's always seen greater things in me than I've seen in myself. And he's always had this magical sort of ability to encourage me to achieve it without putting pressure on me to do so, which may be a unique gift on his part. So both of them, Martin and Rush, have had and still have profound impacts on me, as do the other folks that I mentioned. But those are two mentors that I would highlight from my adult life who just have and continue to have extreme impacts in very positive ways on me.
Wow, those are some exceptional qualities in people and really exceptional qualities in mentors, like the ability to get someone to believe in themselves is a huge thing because you know that they believe in you. But also then with your second example, to get the like, okay, well, yes, I believe in myself, but how do I get going forward? To have a mentor that really is like, okay, these are the things, the practical things I really expect you to do. So we've talked a little bit about the history of mentors. We have talked about what some of the qualities through life examples of what we think excellent mentors are. But I guess the question which we get to in many of our episodes is, why should we care? Like, what does the science say, or what does our personal experience say? Why should we care about being mentors? Because you would look at some leaders in technology or leaders in business and would say, well, they're at the top. They don't really need mentors. So why do we need mentors?
Well, when we talk about, that's a great question. It's an important question because folks in leadership positions tend to be busy and tend to think that they don't have time for the development of their own careers and themselves, and to seek out and invest in being mentored. But when we talk about the benefits that mentoring has on leadership, there are a couple of different large buckets to consider, really. The first is the impact it has on leadership generally, and the second is the impact on specific outcomes. So when we look at successful programs for enhancing leadership performance, a consistent component is having a mentor. And the 4 stars that I talked to said having a mentor who's been there, who's actually lived it, can tell you from personal experience, this is what I did, this is how it works. And so those programs that are most successful at developing leaders have 4 facets: personal study, formal training, opportunities to practice the skills and behaviors being taught, and that mentor to guide the developmental process. So that's one thing. If we talk about studies that have been done on mentoring, those studies have shown that mentees get a lot of benefits. Specifically for leaders, mentoring leads to increased leader competence. Ebby and colleagues found that those who have mentors have improved performance and productivity compared to those without mentors. Kathy Cram found decision-making is enhanced among leaders who have mentors. When I look at data from studies I've done among physician leaders at Stanford, 85% attributed part of their career success to the impact of mentors. And in that study, mentoring was directed at 4 capabilities: improving capability, increasing self-assurance, developing direction, and enhancing visibility. So mentors did all of those things. If we turn our attention to my study of 4-star generals and admirals, 45% of those exceptionally accomplished leaders attributed their career success to the influence of personal mentors. Look, if a 4-star general who's tasked with leading hundreds of thousands of personnel and overseeing an annual operations and maintenance budget north of $100 billion with a B dollars get something out of having a mentor, how much more do we need a mentor?
You don't have to convince me anymore. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have thought all of those characteristics in scientific studies improve with it. Like things I don't think I could have directly connect the dots on, like increased self-assurance. Okay, I could have gotten that from a mentor, but like increased decision-making, things like that. Like it's really interesting and I think super helpful to have the science that of like, listen, this having a mentor is the rising tide that lifts so many of the boats of characteristics of being a great leader. So I think we've probably convinced our listeners of what a mentor is, what characteristics they have, and why even great, exceptional leaders have to have a mentor, need a mentor. But the nuts and bolts, how do we get there? How do we find a mentor if we don't have one? And how do we navigate that relationship and set expectations so that we can get the most out of that relationship? How do we do that?
Man, Justin, those are 2 questions that I think really get at the crux of this discussion in so many ways. I think most people, maybe not most, a lot of people want mentors. But as you kind of alluded to, they don't really know how to find a good one. For whatever reason, I have been very good at ferreting out good mentors. I rattled off a bunch of mentors that I've had. And I've always been intent on finding those people. And that may be the echo of the impact that Rick Loudon had on me. But I've recognized what a benefit that was and have figured out how to go about finding those. But those folks who find a good mentor also often don't know how to capitalize on it. So I've been able to do both of those pretty well. And as a result, I've also been somewhat successful, I think, I hope, in being a mentor to others. And so I can share what I see as the keys to finding a good mentor and getting the most out of it. So first, to find a good mentor, you have to search for one.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds flippant or ridiculous or whatever, but it's not. Great mentors don't just fall in your lap.
Mm.
Martin St. John Sutton didn't fall in my lap. All these people didn't fall in my lap. I went out and looked for it. And that's what anyone has to do. If they want a good mentor, you got to go out and look for it. You got to ask around. Who's the person that people seek for guidance?
Mm-hmm.
The person who continually is sought for their guidance and input in other people's lives, that may be somebody you need to talk to. Look for somebody with a certain set of characteristics. Allen and Poteet identified several characteristics in ideal mentors. In their study, they said listening and communication skills, patience. When we're developing, we're going to screw up. They're going to try to help us. We may not listen. We may screw that up. So they have to be patient. Knowledge of the organization and the industry that you're in. That's going to help them give you better guidance. Ability to read and understand others. That really gets to politics. Understanding social dynamics and having social intelligence. And honesty and trustworthiness rounded out the group. So you need those when you are looking for a mentor. Look for those things. There are two other vital things that aren't captured in the studies, I think. One is they have a willingness to invest in your development. We kind of hit on that already.
Yep.
Right? Like they're interested in your development, in your accomplishment. And the second is fit. People talk a lot about fit. They're interviewing somebody for their organization, bringing them in, whatever. Oh, do they fit? Insert here, culture or vision or whatever it is that we're trying to do. The same is true with a mentor. Is there the right fit? Is this somebody that you feel like you can learn from? One of my mentors, Jim Robbins, had a litmus test that really covered both of these things, I think. Anytime that he would meet somebody, whether he was thinking about mentoring them or whether it was working with them in a research capacity or some other capacity, he always asked himself, is this someone I'd like to have dinner with? If the answer was yes, then it worked out swimmingly. If the answer was no, he would pass. I think that can be really helpful for finding a great mentor. It's something that I wish I would have paid more attention to sometimes in my attempts to mentor folks, where people might do that first part. They may come and say, oh, I've heard that you're a good mentor. I would like for you to be my mentor, whatever. And I'm so invested in mentoring that the vibe may not be right, but I say, okay, I'm going
to do it.
Do this, right? Let's do this thing. And it just, didn't work out. And so if I would have listened to that more earlier, I think I would have had a lot less frustration, and the person that I was trying to mentor would have probably been able to find somebody who would have been a better fit for them. So I think that's really important, to help you figure out when to align with a mentor and when to pass. From either side, if you're mentoring someone or being mentored by someone, I should say, inherent in leadership, I think, is the responsibility, the obligation to mentor others, right? It's this idea of developing people and helping them become better. If you can do that, as you said, it's the tide that lifts all boats. And so I think that is something that we should all be doing. We're primarily focusing this conversation on, as a leader, I need to have a mentor, but conversely, as a leader, I need to be a mentor also. So just want to throw that in. The second big question you asked was how to capitalize on a mentoring relationship. And there are a number of valuable practices there. My general mindset for mentoring meetings is the mentor is doing me a favor. That is, when I'm the mentee, when I'm seeking mentorship, that person, the mentor, is doing me a favor. And so I have this obligation, from my perspective, to respect their time and investment in my development. So there are several things. I can list 6 to help people with that. But first is make time for it. So many people fail to get anything out of mentoring because they don't invest the necessary time. The second thing is set clear goals and expectations. What are your goals for the mentoring? Who's going to do what? Don't just ramble into somebody's office and sit down and say, download into me all the knowledge. Right, exactly. Like, it's not spoon feeding. As the mentee, I would make an agenda. I tried to send it earlier than the night before. Occasionally, I would have to send it the night before, but I would create an agenda and say, here are the things that I would like to talk about, so that the mentor has some idea of where we're going to go with this thing, what we're going to be talking about, and how to do that in a way that would be helpful and not waste everybody's time. It shows respect for the mentor that, hey, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you're trying to do to help me. I want to make this as easy and efficient as possible. So having those clear goals, expectations, even providing an agenda. And this gets to the third thing, which is really preparing for the mentoring meetings. If you don't prepare, not just an agenda, but come in there with specific questions, or not being fooling around with your phone or whatever it is, not setting this as an important time, then you're wasting everybody's time, and that will get you nowhere. Very quickly, the mentor is going to say, you know what? It's clear I'm not important. My time is not important. So perhaps you should find somebody else. Fourth thing is be consistent and committed. Don't be a flake. All right? If you can't be consistent and committed to your own development, really, who are you ever going to be able to lead? If you can't consistently commit to developing yourself as a leader, which is what we're talking about here in this moment, if you can't do that, how do you expect to be able to lead anybody? That's nonsense. The fifth thing, this can be hard especially for folks with big personalities and egos. Seek to be challenged. Ask for and act on feedback and constructive criticism. That is actually the rocket fuel for your development. Realize that you don't have it right. Wherever you are in your development, you can be better. And if you knew that on your own, you probably would already be there. So it requires somebody with a different perspective to step in and say, hey, here's something I've noticed. And being willing to accept that. And be, as General Jim Mattis told me, listen with a willingness to be persuaded. Take that moment to say, that may be hard feedback, but that's really important to my goal. And so embrace that. Which gets to number 6, and that is be open to new ideas, approaches, and even unconventional solutions. A great mentor has a wealth of experience that almost always exceeds your own. You would do well to capitalize on it. So those are the 6 things that I would say, when you're looking for a mentor, and how to make the most of it. Again, make time for it, set clear goals and expectations, prepare for mentoring meetings, be consistent and committed, seek to be challenged, and be open to new ideas, approaches, and unconventional solutions. So that's it, what I would say.
I'm struck by, when you're sort of giving the practical applications, the 2 things that sort of jump out to me. One, we've said this word, we probably could count it in this episode, investment. That's really what this is. It is an investment on both parts, both the mentor being willing to invest in you, and it was sort of highlighted with some of the characteristics we pointed out in the great mentors we've had, that it's an investment. It's an investment of their time, of their own careers, everything about that. And it's an investment in the mentee's time. And it should be looked at like that. Like, this is an investment. You're not investing all your money, but you are investing your personal development. And you should look at the investment from both sides. Is this right? Is this where I'm going to put my money, my time, my energy? The other is, I'm struck by how proactive it is on both sides, but obviously on the mentee. This is not a I'm going to go to a lecture and be taught, and I'm going to have no stake in the game. And so many of those characteristics or sort of take home points that you point out are proactive. Like it really is not a passive occurrence. Being mentored is not passive. So much of what you were pointing out is proactive.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and that's one distinction from the history of Telemachus and Mentor that's different now. And I think it gets to the idea of adult learning, right? When we are young, we learn in a different manner than we do when we're adults. And as adults, we're much more autonomous, self-directed. If we're going to learn, we have to be engaged with the material that we're learning. We have to invest in it, just like you were saying, if we're going to get the most out of it. And so those people who maintain, oh, I'm still in fourth grade mentality, spoon feed me, aren't going to get very far with being mentored. Probably aren't going to get very far really with leading people, because who wants that in their leader?
I think about the difference. When I first started thinking about this, I was like, oh, it's sort of like a parent-child relationship, but it really isn't like that. Like the parent-child is like one direction. You're sort of passively receiving this, or even an early coach-player relationship. Like let's say you're just learning how to play soccer. You're getting most of the information. Whereas if you look like a professional coach and a professional athlete, that athlete is expected to study game film, study defenses. Like that quarterback needs to know everything and then go to the coach for really that type of mentoring relationship. But they can't come passively in it. They can't come just expecting to be spoon-fed.
Well, I think we've hit on something that's really important here for folks to understand. Just as you say, it's not passive, and it's an investment. This gets back to what I was saying early in the episode, where sometimes people in leadership roles think that they're so busy, they just don't have time to invest in their development to be better. If you think about that, that's a bit ridiculous, because the leader you are today is not good enough for tomorrow. While you're sitting on your laurels, while you think you're doing great things and you've got it all figured out, your competition is busting the rear end to be better. And the environment is changing. Whatever thing that you had thrown at you today, it's going to be different tomorrow. And so you have to continually grow, continually invest in improving and getting better, because if you don't, you will fall behind. And then what good are you? So the best leaders are continually growing, continually investing in that personal development to be better. And a huge component of that, for the best, is having the mentor who's been there, done that, and can speak into your life. And then being willing to listen. Mentee, being willing to listen to that.
Well, hopefully this is more for our audience, that the people who are listening to this have already sort of made a commitment, or at least a desire, to be better leaders. I mean, they're listening to this podcast on the science of leadership. So I think we're speaking to the right people, as the people listening to this are like, how can I be better? These are the people I think are going to be proactive in searching out for great
we're
mentors.
Preaching to the choir here?
Preaching to the choir. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I didn't think I was going to learn about as much about mentorship and mentor and just that relationship as I did today, but it's been awesome. I think we're talking to the right group.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. I agree. Great conversation. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, Leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.